Hi everyone, I'm Rita Bennett and I am here to welcome you to the Discovery Days Critical Metals event. It's presented by Discovery Group and we are featuring Inventa Capital. So I'm Rita, I'm the president of Discovery Group. I work with John and Jim. Fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here on this beautiful day. I know it's warm, but we'll live. So the Critical Metals event is the first in a series of events that we're going to be bringing back by the Discovery Group. We plan to host these quarterly, so just keep an eye out for our invitations. So our goal is to hold educational events that have a direct impact on our industry peers and the shareholders that we all have. So we do this by bringing in industry leaders to give informative keynote speeches and well-regarded companies to deliver topic-related presentations. So I'm very pleased to welcome you all today. We want to discuss the importance of and learn more about critical metals in the mining exploration industry. We'll also be highlighting some of the work that has been done in this space, especially by those carried out by the incredible people and companies presenting here today. Before we move on, I'd like to present John Robbins and Jim Paterson. They are the co-founders of Discovery Group, and many of you know. These two gentlemen are the driving force behind the assemblance of great companies with quality projects and above all, the outstanding people that we've worked with. So please give a warm welcome to John Robbins.
Thank you, Rita. I don't have anything prepared today, but as Rita said, in the past we would do these sort of events once in a while and try and highlight a specific commodity or area of the industry that we thought was very topical. And of course, there's nothing more topical today than the critical metal space with the electrification, the transition away from the oil and gas industry, which we can talk about that at length, but it's a reality. And we're blessed in Canada and the Western world to be, have tremendous resources in the critical metal space, but most people don't really understand the space, and they don't understand what's driving the space right now, I think. So what we wanted to do was find somebody who is a leader in the sort of analyst space, and of course, I think everybody knows Michael Gray with Agentis. Very highly regarded mining analyst, spent several years with Macquarie, has a lot of industry experience. We've known each other for longer than I want to admit, but probably I think the leading analyst in Canada when it comes to understanding the critical metal and rare earth space. So Michael was kind enough to agree to give a talk just to kind of introduce his thoughts on the space and where he thinks it's going. And with that, I'll pass it off to Michael.
Great, John. Thanks for the kind introduction. Let's move a few slides ahead here. And appreciate the invitation by John, Jim, and Rita. I think my job here is to set the stage in terms of this macro thesis behind critical minerals. And it's very sustainable. That's the thing that's attracting fund managers to it. But also, it's driven by the factors that I'm going to show you in a second that are really changing the world. Before we go too far, I want to go over a few things in terms of our firm. We're independent research and advisory. We do cover defense metals. I've been to Kodiak's site. I'm going to go to Fireweed next week. I'm very intrigued with Prospector, with the nickel, given my Falconbridge background. And if Tin One would ever invite me to a site, I'd probably go to Tin One site as well. I think I covered them all there. Anyway, critical minerals, get onto the right computer. It's really a tailwind for our sector. I know that it's tough right now in terms of raising capital. Share prices are a bit depressed. Sentiment's not fantastic. I think it's turning a little bit right now. But in our view, the initiatives around the critical minerals sector are providing a huge tailwind. this is not going to stop in terms of the funds that are going to be coming from government, the interest in this macro thesis. And when I go to kind of cover some of the backdrop elements, I know everyone knows these things are happening, but I'm going to try to underscore how much money is coming into the sector, to our mineral exploration sector, our mining sector. So it's really driven by the transition to green energy, first and foremost. There's global demand. Supply deficits are going to emerge unless we fill the gap, and that comes down to finding new critical mineral deposits and assets, and I'm going to get into the definition in a second. The concentration of production makes supply very vulnerable. Give an example, certainly for rare earth elements, with most of the supply and processing capacity in China, that has put a lot of fear into, in particular, the US, and trying to secure the rare earths they need for defense and for magnets for this technology related to the green economy. So the proof that things are happening is really these international agreements, G7 meeting to create the Partnership for Global Infrastructure Investment to build clean energy. That certainly helped by the Russia-Ukraine war, that initiative. And then the Mineral Securities Partnership this January announced was signed by a lot of the first world countries, not the European Union, but US, Canada, Australia, Japan, Germany. So these are very serious initiatives. I'm going to define critical minerals here because I think it's moved from battery metals. That was the term I think we were all using about 3 years ago. And then it went to strategic metals. Transition metals came out. Some of the funds out there have transition metal funds. But I think it's now critical minerals. It's fairly well branded because the international governments have strategies that are critical minerals. And they all kind of need to be on the same page on what these are. So we'll come up with another anecdote in a moment to underscore that point. But the definition is really that these minerals are essential to technology, the green economy, and national security. They are typically subject to supply risks and have very few substitutions. So that makes them critical. Generational opportunity. You don't see this in context of the mining industry very often. The politicians and the leaders behind the associations, the Mining Association of BC in this case, coming out and making bold statements like this. Jonathan Wilkinson, Minister for Natural Resources, Canada's critical mineral strategy will enable this country to seize the generational economic opportunity presented by critical minerals, creating sustainable, well-paying jobs while growing our economy. This was at the PDAC. A couple of weeks ago at the Vancouver Board of Trade, Michael Gehring, critical minerals offer British Columbians a generational opportunity, billions in economic benefits, thousands of jobs that are on the table. The stakes are high. The opportunity is unprecedented. So it's really important to be in tune with this opportunity. The stakes are high is a really interesting point because I think what Michael Gehring is doing is he's basically saying, government, you better deliver. Okay? It's one thing to have new policies and put some money out there, but we need to deliver and execute. The bottom image is just a partnership strategy, security partnership, Canada-US meeting. And then the image right here happens to be the, thank you, Brandon, when we had coffee this morning. This is the critical mineral search over 5 years on Google. And the inflection point is there early 2022. So the world is starting to understand what critical minerals are, and investors are searching. Funds are being created, dedicated to critical minerals, especially over the last 3 years. And we think that'll continue. So for Canada, its critical mineral strategy was unrolled or unveiled in December after consultation, a white paper, and then a pin was put in it. But in this map, you can see the green dots are essentially the projects that have been designated as exploration projects that are critical minerals focus. The red ones are a little bit more advanced, or mines. And so there are 6 priority critical minerals of those 32 I showed you. And they're graphite, lithium, nickel, cobalt, copper, and rare earth elements. I think eventually you might be able to tuck in things like tungsten and maybe zinc, as we go forward. But those are the 6 that the Government of Canada has identified. The $3.8 billion over the next 8 years that are earmarked for critical mineral strategy essentially are in 3 bins. One is projects, and I think these will largely be a little bit more advanced projects, things in the PFS stage or beyond. Infrastructure, big, bold initiatives to open up the north. I'm sure the Ring of Fire is going to benefit from the federal government combining with Ontario. And then permitting. And particular permitting is accelerating the timelines. It's collaborating First Nations, money to come in and get us on our front foot so that we eliminate some red tape. Still going to be responsible permitting, but that's going to be the card that the government plays when they put the permitting money out there. I did have a chance to talk to the Minister of Natural Resources last night, Jonathan Wilkinson, and he echoed that again. So that was good to hear that that is a key message. A couple things to highlight here. The 30% critical minerals tax, exploration tax credit for an investment in exploration. That is really, really important. A lot of you know about it. I've got a slide on the next page that's going to go into a little bit of the metrics on that. And final bullet here is up to 30% clean tech investment tax credit for extraction and processing. This was in the 2023 federal budget, and almost nobody knows about it. It's kind of getting out there, but this moves the needle, NPV and IRR. So we've already wired it into, for example, our defense model. And this is a CapEx break, at least in our way of thinking. So the critical minerals exploration tax credit impact, I think the thing to focus on here is that in the center, this federal tax credit for critical minerals, that supercharges the charity flow through. So net, your cost on a $1,000 investment is $260. So it's phenomenal. It's very competitive when it comes to competing with the US and Canada. And certainly happy to answer questions on that in more detail later. So the vertical supply chains related to electric vehicles in North America, it's it's a fact the auto manufacturers are going to spend $1.2 trillion by 2030. That's in their budgets, their plans. Governments are making the investments to support that because they're going to have to make that investment on the ground. So here's a few initiatives. There's many initiatives. We just took a few of them. May 2023, Canada's Strategic Investment Fund, $300 million to support GM and POSCO, the Korean battery maker, to build EV battery supply chain in Canada. So that's happening. Department of Defense in the US, $35 million for MP Minerals, rare earth element separation plant, which is badly needed. And MP's working on a magnet plant in Texas with General Motors. Small investment, Saskatchewan Research Council, happens to be rare earths. Small, but important to recognize that Canada has that potential. And then in August 2022, Volkswagen Mercedes-Benz, an agreement with Canadian government on lithium, cobalt, nickel, and more recently, they've got an agreement to build a plant in Ontario, battery plant in Ontario. So things are actually happening fairly quickly in Canada and the US. And $7.5 billion related to last year, US Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act. And that's going to install 500,000 EV chargers throughout the states. So this is all unrolling. And I know you probably can't see every single dot there clearly, but I want to draw your attention to the clear ones that don't have any color. Battery factories in the US, there's going to be 53 billion spent, earmarked already. The blue ones, semiconductors, fabrication plants, 183 billion. And everyone's going to get this presentation, I'm sure. These are big numbers, and these are committed funds in large measure. So innovation's on the forefront. I think those projects and companies that are innovating are actually going to attract some of this government money. I'm not going to go through the details of all the countries, but I think Canada's actually on their front foot with a lot of policy. They've got a kind of a seat at the front table when it comes to the critical minerals strategy globally. I think I'd point down to the bottom bullet there that at PDAC it was announced there's $344 million being deployed for 5 new programs and initiatives. There's some money coming down the food chain to the developers as well, not a lot, but I think that's going to evolve. And the US I think the Department of Defense is going to be quite active, not only in the US, but coming into Canada, looking for projects, given we have a cooperation agreement. The thing I want to highlight with Australia is that top bullet, $2 billion related to loan facilities. The government will be loaning companies. And then down at the bottom, Europe's a little bit behind. They are seeking agreements with Africa to secure supply, including the Congo, so a little bit of a pivot on their initiatives there. And then finally, Jake, my associate, found this great graph. Essentially, on the y-axis is we don't have critical minerals. So in that top box, including US, European Union, Korea, Japan, we don't have this stuff. And then in the far side, lower corner, we have a lot of it, and we don't really need sources. We've got supply. So China's kind of in between. They have a lot of stuff, but they also need a lot of materials from the Western world. So I'd encourage you to look at that slide a little bit more, the criticality versus strategic value. And this one I love. This is one Anna Rattan of McKinsey showed me, I think marketing, maybe it was last fall. But anyway, in 25 years of lithium production here, starting in 1995 going out to 2021, in yellow is Aussie production. They started out there 5-10% for years and years, maybe emerged up to 15%, maybe 20 at best. But look at what they've done. Now they've got 53% of the global lithium market in terms of production. Seems like out of nowhere. And there's a couple reasons. Up top there, Mount Marion went into production in 2017 and Pilgangoora in 2018. But I think part of it is the government has been helping get mines permitted. They've been on their front foot in terms of getting things done. And so I think that's really important to take away. Canada's nowhere there right now with some of the lithium initiatives in Northern Quebec, Northern Ontario. Maybe they'll be on this, but you have to be in production. Okay. I'm not saying we are going to be Mother Teresa as a sector, but I really feel strongly we are moving away from the Rodney Dangerfield syndrome. I will have challenges with my daughter at the dinner table telling her that the mining sector is actually important and it's responsible by and large. There's some bad actors out there. But especially with critical minerals, I'm finding there's an opening now. There's agreement amongst a lot of the NGOs, the environmentalists, that undeniably, if we want to execute on a green economy, we need you guys. And that's a bit of a game changer that we just haven't experienced before as a sector. So that's special as far as I'm concerned. So last slide, key takeaways, critical minerals investing. There's this confluence of factors that are creating a major macro tailwind for the sector. And that's exciting because it's sustainable. As far as I'm concerned. Government strategies and initiatives are injecting capital in the sector. Number two, focus on best-of-breed assets. If I'm an investor and as an analyst, we're trying to find the best possible assets to focus on, because not every company is going to have a critical minerals asset winner. So what are the best-of-breed assets? Well, management teams, investors have to filter for them, including governments. And if that supply gap is going to be filled, we want the government to be making the right decisions. We want them to be advancing the right projects. And finally, government, indigenous, industry collaboration, absolutely essential given we're really focused on tier 1 jurisdictions. I think here, Canada, to a lesser extent the US, and Australia. And so it's key to that security of supply. We need domestic production on a lot of these critical minerals. And the industry needs to, I think, increasingly lobby the governments. I don't know how many people in the room, maybe put up your hand if you've done something on the lobbying front or you've addressed the provincial government on some issues through the associations or otherwise. Anybody? Okay. We've got some people. That's really important to support AMBC, the MABC, certainly for BC and other initiatives on lobbying can be very effective, having been in that seat before with the Chamber of Mines way back when. And finally, this governments must help to unlock critical minerals regions with logical infrastructure development. I think Chris Taylor, wherever he is, there he is, can really attest to this, and we have a kind of a view that if you build it, they will come. This is the Northwest Transmission Line. If that wasn't built for $700 million in BC into the Golden Triangle, Red Chris doesn't become a mine. And you don't have that $4.4 billion worth of mergers and acquisitions activity up there. So really key, in my view, that that message get through, whether that be electrification into Yukon or the Ring of Fire initiatives and things like that. And finally, I think dealing with bureaucrats over the years, you've got to convince them, whether you're permitting or other initiatives, how to get to yes. Let's not find 20 reasons how to get to no. Let's get to yes. Very important to have that mindset, in my view. So that's the overview. I hope that's been somewhat informative. A couple of ads. Here's Agentis Capital in terms of our firm, and my partners Scott Speed and David Stevens, and our services. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. I think that was a great overview of the situation. I'm curious, what do you think, like how challenging is it going to be to when you look at how much China and to a lesser degree, I guess, Russia, but I mean, they control the vast majority of some of the more esoteric minerals in the critical metal space. How they control a lot of the processing technology and stuff. So it's one thing to find, a rare earth or, some of these projects, even on the tungsten side, things like that. But how big a challenge is that going to be to deal with that side of things?
Yeah, I think you've nailed a really, really important point that when it comes to rare earth elements in particular, China controlling the processing technology, and there's not much in the public domain. It's going to be a matter of putting capital into getting the infrastructure in North America, and then having the supply and developing expertise. It's not going to be easy because that is one of the more challenging areas to crack the code on the mineralogy. I think tungsten is probably a little bit more straightforward, and I'm sure Brandon's going to expand on that. But it's another one where China has, I think, more or less turned the switch on and off in terms of supply to impact prices. So there's got to be some sort of regulation, I think, confidence that you can have a floor price or something like that. Yeah.
That's great. Does anybody else? It's a great opportunity to, if anybody's got a question for.
I'll be around too.
Yeah, Louder? You want me to talk louder? Okay. All right. Well, anybody who wants to grab Michael, ask questions, or anybody has a question right now, that'd be great. One thing I would just sort of say, Discovery Group has always been, historically kind of a precious metals focused entity. Most of our successes in the past, Kaminak, the two Great Bears, Northern Empire, they've all been gold related. But when I look at the group now, more than half of the companies in the group are critical metals focused companies. And I think Michael touched on a really good point, is that there is an inflection right now. Like we've been the pariah in the industrial space, and I do sense that there's a real sea change happening. I see it at my dinner table with some fairly left of center individuals in my household. There's an acceptance now that we need these minerals, and I think we all need to do our part, whether it's at a cocktail party, just lobbying those naysayers, talking to our government bodies. We need, it's one thing for the federal government, the provincial governments, territorial governments to pay lip service to our industry. We actually need fundamental changes. In the Yukon, we need power to come from British Columbia up to the Yukon. We need the permitting regime to change dramatically, because it's unacceptable that projects take 10 years to permit. So everybody needs to do their part, because we all rely on this industry.